prayerful Catholics who are trying to stand up against injustice and want a church that they can tell their children about. It's not a protest. It's certainly not a schism. It's not a start. It's a recognition of something that's been happening for decades, a slowly emerging lay-led Catholic Church, which supports the message, love your neighbor, inclusivity, equality, and the end to the superiority of the single caste of celibate male priests. So that we can turn round the exodus of our children. You know, people keep saying, what's happening to the children? Well, they've got the brains. They are leaving. As one of our wonderful speakers from Australia, a theologian, Elisa Roper, says, and I will quote her, "We do not raise our children in the modern world to accept the experience of clericalism, nor to value the colonial and patriarchal roots of that clericalism. And we must always remember that it is clericalism that is the central factor in all church-related abuse." Anyway, I hope you will enjoy our little trip into the engine room of Spirit Unbounded, and to kick us off and to read a poem that isn't hers, although she is a poet, is one of the engineers who's been working in the Spirit Unbounded press group, Mary Ellen Chown from Ontario, who for 22 years has been an active member of Catholic Network for Women's Equality in Canada. Over to you, Mary Ellen.
Thank you very much, Penelope, and welcome to everyone. It's an honor to be here and to offer a short reflection as we begin. In considering human rights in an emerging Catholic Church and human rights everywhere, I offer for your reflection this poem from Rita Patnode, a wise elder seed keeper and a member of the Catholic Network for Women's Equality in Canada that was founded in 1981. We are one of 45 companion groups, and happy to be so, that comprise Spirit Unbounded. And so if we just take a moment to breathe and to be present in this moment. Seed keepers, you are like these seeds, resting gently in my palm. Neither can you be owned, modified, sold to the highest bidder. Like these seeds, you belong to yourself, to the community, to the whole world, really, being beauty, laughter, and food for the people. Let us be seed keepers, you and I, wise-fingered, clear-eyed, treasuring what is true, kneading all into bread for the life of the world. May it be so.
Amen. Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. That was beautiful. I'm Mary Ring. Some of you will have had emails from me or know me from before. And I'd like to do a really practical little exercise here, just to make it very easy for us to join when the time comes, when we get our links and we reach Sunday the 8th, and we can actually see the wealth of treasures awaiting us. Peter, am I okay to share my screen?
Yeah, you can just share.
Lovely. I hope I can just bring up. You will all have seen our website by now, and the galloping hard work that we go into keeping it up for you. If you haven't seen our wonderful trailer by now, make sure you do on the homepage. But if I could just bring you gently to, my thing is sitting right over there. There we are. Bring us gently to the event page, 14th of October, with all its buttons, with everything that you could possibly need. Now, you'll say we know all of these, but a relatively new one up here, and we apologise that it's taken us so long. We're rather proud of the programme. when you click on program, you will see Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They are our recorded days. So look out, please, in the middle of next week for your link, which will arrive. Let's have a look now and see what that link will give us when we get there. Here, for example, I hope everybody is seeing Sunday, 8th of October. And you will get, sorry, I'm having to move my wretched sharing bar out of the way. Here are some of the riches that will await. On Sunday, 8th of October, you could begin with the Discipleship of Equals and all these wonderful talks on it. You might think, oh, excluded because of race. Wow, they look interesting. You could go to this amazing film, Not Worth Killing, from the Immaculate Heart community. Very powerful. You might go to Unequal Equality. You can see how we've been blessed with voices from across the world. Shaking the Tree, Mary Varley's kindly going to say a bit about this for us in a short while. And so you will have the choice of all this watching on Sunday the 8th. You will go to bed fired up and you'll think, I can't wait for Monday 9th. And so you can make your way through that week. And then also we have the delights of Friday, Saturday. I'm showing you this so that I think you might be wise to take a lovely stroll through it when you've got spare moments and look ahead to the things that you think might really interest you. So this is our 2 live and in-person days, beginning at 9:30 UK time, 10:30 Rome time. We'll be in parallel from Bristol to Rome and out across the world. And this program takes us on through right into Saturday, all the different events and excitements that we have got there. So that's really the main bit that I wanted to apprise us of. Head into your program, have a look. There are all sorts of other fascinating details. There are people's biographies. If a friend wants a ticket, they can go straight over there. There's so much to do. Peter, could you just give me the slide to pop up?
Which one is that?
It's the slide for people to look out for their link, but we don't need it, so it's not important.
Yeah, hang on. Keep on talking for a minute.
I only have to say to everybody, please, around about the middle of next week, probably Wednesday the 5th, please look out for your link. It will come to you by MailChimp. Put it in a very safe place in your computer. We will be run off our legs week, and it's very difficult to chase around sending people links that they haven't got or they've lost. So please look out for your link. From Wednesday, 5th of October, we'll be trying to make sure that you really have got it, that you've opened it. We can see on MailChimp that you've safely opened it, and we beg you to keep it safe. Then come Sunday the 8th, you have hours and hours of happy watching. You really don't have to do it all on Sunday 8th. You can watch a little and next week and the week after. Thank you, everybody. That's me done, the practical side. I would very much like to introduce Michael Sentore, the editor of today's American Catholic, who is very kindly with us this evening, and he's going to steer the questioning for us. Today's American Catholic is a US-based journal of inquiry, of reflection and opinion that seeks to promote religious dialogue and deepen the faith of its readers. Michael's essays and articles have appeared in the National Catholic Reporter, in the Los Angeles Review of Books, Religious Socialism, the Clarion Review, and other print and web-based publications. In addition to working with the Spirit Unbounded press team, he serves on the steering committee of Catholic Church Reform International. And he's also, I would add, a person of no mean poetic and spiritual gifts. We're delighted to welcome him to be here with us tonight to guide our question session. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you, Penelope and Maggie and Peter and all the Spirit Unbounded team. It's been a special blessing personally to weave these new relationships and work with you all and be part of this emerging movement. So thank you. And today's American Catholic is proud to be a companion on the road. So it's a wonderful time for us and for the church, and I'm proud to be a part of it. We're going to begin this evening with our first presenter will be Virginia Saldana. She is a writer and public speaker on how the small Christian community is a unit of the Synodal Church. She's a former executive secretary of the Women's Desk of the Archdiocese of Bombay, a member of the CBCI Commission for Women and the FABC Women's Desk and Office of Laity, Family, and Women, and she sat on the Executive Council of Pax Christi International. Virginia began to engage with the issue of sex abuse of women in the church in 1998 during her tenure with CBCI, and actively took up cases when in 2010, victims of the clergy sex abuse scandal approached her for help on how to address the issue. The initiative expanded to include women across India and now internationally with the organization ECA, or Ending Clergy Abuse. So we'll begin the format this evening. We'll have a clip from the presentations forthcoming next week, and then our presenters will respond. So we'll begin with Virginia's clip now.
If the priesthood does not change, we cannot talk about a synodal church. We cannot become a new way of being church. Bishop Peter Kang of Korea points out that the early Christian community radically broke up the hierarchical model of authority. The early Christian community was a brotherhood and sisterhood of equal partners. Priests have to be animators and develop a sense of mutual trust and shared responsibility with the people of God. Lay leaders should be trained and empowered to take responsibility for the smooth running of the community. Since women are the majority leaders, women have to be empowered with opportunities to study theology and given opportunities for greater leadership in the church. The Synod of 2023 has to examine the vision of the neighborhood communities closely to make the church truly synodal. If the church does not change from the top, I think we people should begin to change it from below by forming spontaneous lay-led communities. We are the church. Let us become church.
Virginia, if you care to reflect on that for us.
Good evening, everybody. Pardon the poor lighting here. I'm speaking to you from my hotel in Rome. I was trying to find a quiet place, but I realize now it's dinner time and everybody's passing down to go to the dining room. So there's no place that's quiet in a hotel. And the Wi-Fi isn't too good in my bedroom. So anyway, I'm here with the group HRECC, as Michael said, Ending Clergy Abuse, and we are here with a sizable number of survivors of sex abuse, ranging from a priest from Slovakia, LGBTQI, 2 persons, young women, 2 young women, and most of the others are older people who were abused as children. And listening to their stories, you see the inordinate power that is given to priests, to clergy, to bishops, and how it is misused and how it is used to abuse. I mean, there was not a dry eye when these stories were being shared, and you can still feel the pain that is lingering in everybody's life. One guy said, "I feel like I am dead." And is it the role of priests to bring death to people or to bring life? So I have many questions about the current form of the priesthood. What Jesus started was house churches. He taught us to live in communities where we would care for each other. If we had these communities where people gathered together, there would be no domination of a priest. There would be no worshipping of this man who claims to be in the place of God. So we need to reflect, is this the priesthood that Jesus wanted? Is this the church that Jesus wanted? Is this a structure that will really bring life to people? And therefore, accordingly, we need to look at structures that bring life. I will stop now because there's a crowd passing.
Thank you, Virginia. It's beautiful. Structures that bring life. That's a phrase to meditate on. Next presenter we have is Brian Devlin, who is also a member of the Spirit Unbounded team. Brian was ordained to the priesthood in 1985. During his time in the seminary, he was a victim of abuse by the seminary spiritual director. His abuser was eventually promoted to the rank of archbishop and even later a cardinal. And Brian was one of a group of priests who whistle-blew about the predations of this cardinal. Brian left the ministerial priesthood to work with heroin addicts and prostitutes during the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic in Edinburgh. He is the author most recently of Cardinal Sin, Challenging Power Abuse in the Catholic Church, which is available from Columba Press. So we'll see a clip from Brian now.
And whistleblower. He reveals a dark world of threat and blackmail in the seminaries.
When we look around and take stock of the sheer chaos, the misery, the destruction that clerical power abuse has poured on us, when we look at the parish priest or the bishop who rages at the destruction of society caused by all the isms, humanism, socialism, secularism, and the big one, feminism, when we hear again and again clergy pounding down about homosexuality, about divorce, about the secondary place of women in the church, we need maybe to stop and consider what made these men the way they are. Where did they get all this bile from? Where did they learn to be so full of fear and hate for the diversity of our creation? I think I know, if not the entire answer to that question, then part of it. I entered Drygrange Seminary in Scotland at 18 years of age, breathless with wonder. I was going to be a priest. I was going to do good things. I was going to be holy. I was going to help people. I was going to make my mother proud of me. I was going to be a saint. And then I got there, and slowly, I realized that this place of formation was, in fact, a dangerous place, a place of secrets and threats. Every priest that you've ever met, every bishop, every cardinal, and every pope has experienced what I've experienced. They've experienced seminary or a place of formation.
Elaborate for us.
Thank you. Yeah, well, my firm belief and why I'm involved in Spirit Unbounded and have embraced this reality is that I believe that the well that Catholics drink from has become poisoned. And I believe that the poisoners, by and large, are the hierarchy. And I think we need to name that and we need to own that. And they have the power. They have abused their power. And we need to address that and challenge it. Father Jim Keenan, a Jesuit who died recently, has coined the phrase hierarchicalism. And he describes that as being the father of clericalism. Clericalism comes from inadequate bishops and inadequate hierarchy. And I think that we need to address those issues. And my presentation will be about one part of that, which is my experience in seminary, where I was abused by my spiritual director, who went on to be a cardinal in in the church. I believe that we've hardly touched the surface of power abuse in the church, and it's not just a sexual phenomenon. It's financial, it's spiritual, and it's pastoral. And we have a right, I think, as lay people, and we have a responsibility not just to be passive bystanders, but to be upstanders in chasing this new truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for all your courageous work in your writings and your witness. Our next presenter will be Rhiannon Perry Thompson. She is the former National Childbirth Trustee and Honorary Secretary. She is an active environmentalist, as a Green Trade Union branch representative and a member of Catholic Concern for Animals. She also has a strong commitment to interfaith relations and is the Catholic Church representative on her local Christian Aid Committee. She has an interest in regional and Indigenous languages and is a Welsh and Cornish languages learner. She is also a university professor and adult education teacher. So we'll now watch a clip from Rhiannon's presentation.
As a civilly divorced and soon to be remarried, whose first marriage hasn't been nullified by the church, open a new chapter on their lives with hope and purpose, true acceptance in all its dimensions is a deep desire. For as Francis argues, it is a condition for building inclusive societies. We don't want to be outsiders, outliers, judged for who we are and the choices that we've made with discernment, with love, and perhaps not without some degree of regret and sadness. But according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, a new union adds to the, and I quote, gravity of the original rupture, and places the remarried spouse in a situation of public and permanent adultery. Or as one cardinal has put it, the remarried are living in a state of grievous sin.
Thank you. I realise I'm sitting in exactly the same spot now. Sorry about that. No, thanks. Thank you very much for that. Yes, it's interesting. I mean, one of my strong motivations, and similar to yours, is but being part of this Spirit Unbounded movement is a very strong motivation. In fact, is a belief that a church which is truly welcoming and embracing would not deny ever anyone full sacramental participation. The Eucharist, after all, lies at the heart, and I think I say that a little bit later on in my talk, of many people's worship. And Francis himself has said, as I think I've just mentioned, that it isn't a prize for the perfect, but and he emphasizes its restorative nature. And the words of I think, a really wonderful contemporary Methodist hymn, eat this bread and never hunger, drink this cup and never thirst. Christ invites us to the table, the last becomes the first. And a Methodist minister in the UK has recently written, God looks beyond a label and sees a person made in his or her image. And he says, imagine inviting guests for a meal, but you only have the silver cup. And I'm delighted to say, in fact, that amongst the many interfaith voices that we'll be in the company of next month, is the Vice President of the Methodist Conference in the UK. And it's a church, the Methodist Church, the church, like many, many others, puts its belief in an open table into practice, because I think having an open table is really important. You know, some people, and some of us may not be the only one who've experienced of that, closed on them and kind of an empty place at the table because of the label that they carry. And in my case, as you now know, civilly divorced and remarried. But a church, you know, that truly believes that all are welcome, that embrace and believe in an open table and incidentally open ministry to women. I mean, can you simply imagine Christ excluding anyone ever from his table or his ministry? You know, when did you last hear him talk about excluding anyone? And finally, you know, I'm hopeful that Spirit Unbounded will unleash through all our voices a strong message to the church that now, not a moment later, is the time to embrace inclusivity, and not just to talk about it, but to embody it, because everyone matters equally. And as it would surely enrich the church, because as Father Richard Raw has said, it's interesting, exclusion harms both the excluded and the excluder. And I think finally that we can say, on the other hand, that inclusivity enriches and celebrates and nourishes and affirms. And I don't think that's an impossible dream. Let's go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Beautiful. Thank you for inviting us to move beyond labels and invoking that image of the open table.
Thank you. It's a beautiful image, isn't it?
Gorgeous.
Very real.
Definitely, definitely. So our final presenter this evening will be, before we turn to questions, will be Mary Varley. Mary is a former social worker who describes herself as appalled by the extent to which abuse and power is endemic in the worldwide institutional church. She joined the Root and Branch to work for the transformation of structures and culture to make the church a place of safety for all. She will introduce in her presentation Shaking Tree, which is a new project from Root and Branch's Stolen Lives initiative. So we'll watch a clip now.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, this is just Mary talking over a slide, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think the time's always right to tell survivors' stories. There's so many reasons why I could tell you that it's right, but I just want to mention three. We've got the synod happening in Rome. We don't know how much the synod is actually going to get to the heart of what's wrong with the church through the voice of victims and survivors. The Instrumentum Laboris actually says, and I just thought, oh, honestly, are we still asking this question? But we are. The church is saying, how can we take meaningful and concrete steps to offer justice to victims? How long is it going to take for the church to catch on? There's another reason, I think, why the context is right, and that's the disconnect that we see between the public pronouncements of the church and people's experience of reporting abuse. There are so many examples I can give, but I'm just going to single out one. Francis said that a priest who's an abuser cannot remain a priest. Yet, what happens when survivors report their abuse, when abusers acknowledge the abuse? What happens in relation to laicization, a word in itself that I really dislike, but that's the word that's used. It isn't just about the delays and the silence in progressing the cases. It's that victims are absolutely absent from the process. No one asks them about the facts of what have happened. And unlike in civil law, they don't get asked for an impact statement, a victim impact statement. And the CDF often refuses to actually carry out laicization, even when religious orders or dioceses ask for it. And the third thing I want to point to in relation to the context is, don't let anybody ever tell you that abuse is in the past. Virginia is bringing some brave people to Rome to talk about abuse. Brian has shared his own experience. But actually, the crisis is ongoing. Just mention Marco Rupnik. And also, what's happening in Africa and in Asia. Stories are beginning to appear about the abuse and the sexual violence that religious sisters have been experiencing. Talking about being used as sexual playthings, being raped in confession, or working in conditions of modern slavery. So those are just some of the reasons why it's really important to shake the tree. And shaking the tree is about people like you and I, who are victims, survivors of abuse, telling their stories. You'll hear stories from women and men, both lay and religious, and they'll share their experience of sexual, emotional, and spiritual violence and abuse. You're going to hear stories from Papua New Guinea, the Democratic Republic of Congo, India, Lebanon, Scotland, Australia, England, and the United States. You're going to hear how Black people's voices are excluded and erased from the narrative in the United States, and how important it is for government commissions of inquiry to be informed by victim survivors in Australia. Each person is going to tell their story in their own way, which is just how it should be. Hierarchical, whom you can see on the screen here, who opens our Shaking the Tree sequence, says, your story is as unique as your life, as your own dignity. Finding one's voice is important beyond measure. Everyone has the human right to be protected from harm and to be safe. These stories show that this is absolutely not the case in the Catholic Church today. And that's why, although I think it's a hard listen, but it's a hopeful listen. And it's a hopeful listen because you're going to hear many courageous, brave, and persistent people who refuse to be broken down by what's happened to them. And that's why the voices of victim survivors must shake the tree that's the Catholic Church to its furthest roots. It's a tree that's so shaken that many of us are concluding that the choice is actually quite stark. The alternatives are complete regeneration, rebirth, or death. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and for giving space for people to tell their story in their own way, as you said, so vital. So I believe now we're going to be moving into the Q&A portion of the evening. Peter, you might have a...
Yeah, okay. So we've got about 40 minutes now for a time of question and answers. So if you can, I'll spotlight all our speakers so they're on the screen as a panel. If you'd like to put a virtual hand up, so you go to your reactions button on your Zoom taskbar, you'll find there's an option to raise your hand. That'll move you to the top of my screen, and then I'll spotlight you and you'll join the panel. So you can ask Michael will ask you to ask your question and you'll say on screen, well, get a reply. So I'll remove yourself. I'll spotlight the speakers.
I should also say we'll be watching the chat and we'll be trying to monitor that as well. If people like to type in their question, if that's preferred, we'll try and get to those as well. I can
so if anyone would like to ask the first question.
As we're waiting, maybe some thoughts are percolating. There are a couple questions in the chat that came through. One was for Brian, possibly we could begin with. Brian, the noises coming from the Vatican seem to say, we've got this clerical abuse under control, no need to worry. Many people in the pew seem to think that this is the truth too. What do you make of this claim?
I think nothing is further from the truth than that claim. I think that I would go to the words of Pope Francis, who talks about the cult of appearance. And what he means by that is it may look as though the processes are in place in some places, but does it make any difference to people's lives? And I think that many of us look aghast at the Vatican's lack of response, a lack of authenticity to deal with this human disaster that's happening in the Catholic Church. And I think that anyone who is duped by the PR machine of the Vatican needs to take a look at themselves and needs to reconsider what's important here. This is not a PR public relations exercise. This is an exercise in whether or not we are wanting to be and living a beatitudinal existence within our church. And anyone who is at all telling us that the abuse crisis, and it's not just, as I said, sexual abuse, it's power abuse in all its forms. It's financial abuse, it's the abuse of governance, it's spiritual abuse. All of these forms need to be addressed. And the only way that we can address that is, as Virginia has said, through addressing clericalism and through addressing hierarchicalism in the church.
If any of our other presenters might have thoughts on this, or we could turn to other questions.
I think that's really important. Sorry.
I might just add one small thing. It's our church and it's up to us. I don't believe that the crisis, the abuse of power, can be dealt with without ordinary people standing up and refusing to accept the status quo.
I would like
And
to,
as Brian has said, there's a spectrum of abuse, isn't there? There's a wide spectrum, and none of it's acceptable. None of it. Thank you, Brian.
I would like to point out that I think God gave us a sign during COVID. What happened during COVID? We were celebrating the Eucharist round our dining tables as a family. People were burying their own dead. People did without the Eucharist. I mean, the YouTube Eucharist, what does that mean? It does not mean anything. It was just clericalism being reinforced. But the real meaning was when people sat around the dining table and celebrated the Eucharist as a family. So that is what is important. God has already given us a sign. Let's take it.
Nicely said. Catherine, I see a hand up. Catherine Walther, would you like to ask your question?
I just wanted to make a comment. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear
Right.
you. Yep.
Okay, good. I think I'm not in any way excusing priests, but I believe that they are victims of the structures that have been set up as well. And one of the huge things is ordination itself, and the whole proclamation that they are set over and above a normal human once they're ordained is absolutely ridiculous. I think that whole thing needs to be looked at. Jesus didn't ordain anybody. And, priesthood only came about centuries later. So they too are the victims of the structures. We need to look at all the structures that have formed that make the church what it is today.
Definitely, and including seminary education, as I think Brian alluded to, and there's so many factors. Penelope, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer one of the questions in the chat. Reina Braganza Pasana from India, who is a speaker, was asking, how do nuns and a lot of people she knows who can't afford a link, can't afford our ticket, get a free link, which is what we're definitely offering to people like that in need, and certainly nuns. Email hello@spiritunbounded.org. I've put it wrong in my email to you, but you've got my email, Raina, and send their emails in and we'll add them to the complimentary ticket list. We've been asked for quite a few like this, and we would love to spread this as widely as possible. We really are doing this work so that people can hear the work. So hello@spiritunbounded.org, please.
Thank you, Penelope. Question from in the chat this is specifically for Virginia. I think I'm right in saying that when you set up small lay groups in India, the hierarchy closed them down. Is it time to begin to ignore the hierarchical church, which has made a mockery of its authority? is how do we balance that tension between kind of the decentralized lay groups and the, the structure of the hierarchy?
Yes, I think it is. They have lost their credibility. They have lost their credibility completely. They have made a mockery of the gospel. And it is high time to ignore the hierarchy. And we have to read the word of God ourselves and see how it speaks to our lives, how we apply it in our lives. I think then we will be living our faith rather than practicing our faith. You see the difference between the two words? The church talks about practicing the faith. We should be living our faith. And I think we have to begin to live our faith and stop practicing.
This might play into kind of another question that could build on that. I'm curious how the presenters see, this is a theme we've talked a lot about, and it's come up in some of our group meetings, the relationship between Spirit Unbounded and the Synod, which kind of plays into this idea of the structure of the church and our doing it ourselves. How do we see what is our hope for both in the kind of collaborations that might happen on the ground and the emerging movement that comes out of a group like Spirit Unbounded? Just kind of any open thoughts on that?
Well, I'll kick off, and hopefully other people will come in behind me. I learned recently, only through the work of the press group for Spirit Unbounded, Michael, that much of what happened in the Second Vatican Council, what eventually appeared in documentation, was initiated in discussions in cafes and bars and restaurants and informal gatherings throughout Rome. And I see that, maybe I'm being naive, but I do see something similar happening here. I don't think, I was asked by a journalist whether or not we were in any sense in competition with the Bishops' Synod in Rome. And of course we aren't. They carry all of the power. They have the room. We are not invited into the room. But we can create our own room. And that's what we're doing. And our theme here is human rights in the emerging Catholic Church. And I've been reading a lot about Rosa Parks, the civil rights leader in the United States, who sat in her seat in the bus because that was her right as a human being. And I think we need to bring that reality, that sense of reality, into the discussions that we're having in the church just now, that there are real civil rights, human rights, abuses going on in the Catholic Church every day. One of the major human rights issues that we have is a misogynistic apartheid system that does not allow women any role of leadership within the church. And I think if the Catholic Church was a country, no one would buy our goods from us. We would be sanctioned. So I think that we have a lot to do as lay people, as Mary Varley has said. But we are, I think, a very significant organisation now, and I have great hopes for our event in October.
Thank you, Brian. This seems to have generated some feedback from some folks gathered here. So I see Rosa, I believe Moza Manriquez was the first hand up. If you'd like to share your comment.
Hi, yes. I'm in East Los Angeles in the United States, and I do want to address what you're saying, Brian. One of the things here in the US, and I'm a Roman Catholic woman priest, and one of the things that has been addressed in the organizations that I'm in, including the Immaculate Heart community, is the need for anti-racism training. Because I think it's by looking at what has happened historically, especially in the Black communities, that we start understanding how white supremacy operates, how dominion operates. I mean, something like listening to Audre Lorde, telling people you cannot dismantle the house of the master with the master's tools, tells us a lot. Or looking at how the plantations were run, where the enslaved people and the indentured servants were hand in hand and actually had a relationship with each other. And then the masters decided to make those indentured servants into overseers. And as overseers, now they were able to go to the master and say, this is what's going on in the fields. And we can look at our church and see how that happens when we have our brothers and sisters who are awfully concerned about things that just don't seem right. And they go running to a bishop, a cardinal, a pope, or whoever, and squash whatever the Holy Spirit is whispering to all of us. I think really, really looking at groups of people who have been oppressed and who work for their own freedom and their own rights can teach us a lot.
Thank you, Rosa, for those historical parallels. And I see in the chat you'll be one of the speakers at the event. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you. It's beautiful, not beautiful. They are necessary connections. Is the word. Thank you. I see Julian Ramos next.
Here I am. Not Julian. Yem is William.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
As we say, Yem Bill in Majorca, in Spain. So my English is very bad, but I try to understand you. And I want a change in our church and in our society. And now is a very, very important moment. I can assure you, I am an old teacher. I am 85 years old. I have been 10 years Catholic priest. And from 49 years, I'm married. I have children, young children. But I presume that the change must be now or not will be never. Looking here where I live, our children, our young people don't go more to the church. Our church in our country, in our little country, is closed. Only one day a mass, but not a really mass, a traditional mass. So or we change or the church is out. But I hope for change, and I am trying to do it. My work in this moment is to look to the tradition, to the history, to the theology, and there must be a very big change, a very big change. Otherwise, no more church, no more Christian. I am looking for a change. I am glad to be with another culture with you. My culture is Catalan. I have a private online. Many things are there in Catalan, but the language is not the problem. The problem is what we are going to do. So please go on. Young people must do the change. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us of that urgency.
Right, thank you.
Margaret Mary, good to see you.
I think she's there we are.
Yep. Oh. Margaret Mary, I think you're muted.
Myself. Is that it?
That's it.
Hey, we can hear you. Yep.
I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I wanted to agree with Brian. I think the leadership in our church has got to go. And I think that even the lay people that work for our diocese are as clerical as the priest. So it's not a clerical priest problem. It's a human being problem of people that want to aggrandize themselves. You know, in the Jesuit exercises, spiritual exercises, one of the first things you do is get rid of your inordinate attachments. We're supposed to go before the Lord and get rid of things that are not of the gospel or not of Jesus. And we have to work on ourselves all our life. So it's not making more rules. Like in Focolare, they started out pretty well, but look at, they became clerical and they hurt people, Community and Liberazione. And Archbishop Scicluna just got back from Peru. There was a lay movement there for years, and look how they turned out. So I think we all have to look at ourselves and see what Jesus is asking us to go forward. And I think there should not be seminaries. They should all close. I think the biggest problem that we have in our church is how men and women treat each other. And I think if you look at the radicality of the beautiful sacrament of matrimony, when you look at how men and women treat each other, and then you think, look at the gospel, look at what the sacrament of marriage is. It's a phenomenally radical, healing relationship that brings loved children into the world and can transform the world. So my thing is to get rid of seminaries, have a college or a university of ministry. Men and women will go together if they feel God's call, learn theology, scripture, and they will learn how to pray and discern God's call. And maybe they should get married, maybe they should stay single, maybe they should be ordained, but we're supposed to be a family working together. And I just came on a Zoom with the Initiative for Asian Catholics, and they're talking in Japan and all the different countries about how men and women don't relate. And so their seminaries are going to be full of men that have never had a relationship with a woman, not even in high school or college. And it's kind of sick and it's kind of stupid. So I just think we have to start promoting new ideas. We have to trust the Holy Spirit and Jesus. And if people are really grounded in Jesus and the Holy Spirit, they won't go around making up for their own deficiencies by taking it out on other people, like sexual abuse and whatever. There's something very kinky and sick about that whole thing, and how it's escaped notice and being covered up is sicker still. So I think we have to really get those bishops out and make our voices heard. And then secondly, I want to say that I think that it's going to take older people like most of us, or otherwise people not being employed by the church, because their mechanisms to get back at you are hurting financially, or revenge, or character assassination, which I think we all know about. But the fact is, I'm a theologian in our theological group. People, the younger theologians, they're very well prepared, but they can't speak out because they need to work on their careers. Most are married and have little kids. So what are they going to do? It's going to take us who are past that stage and who are financially free from the intimidation, and we don't care anymore about character assassination or all those negative things, to say, thank you for sharing, now get out of the way.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I think your point about the ego is really well made.
Yes.
It's so inhibiting. Thank you for that. It's very powerful.
Thank you.
Questions from Catherine, and then I see two Catherines. Catherine Salmon first. If you'd like to unmute.
Hello, thank you all for your contributions. I was struck this morning when I knew I was coming on this Zoom, and I asked my students, I teach sixth form and I teach a lot of feminist theology, and I said, what would you like to say in the synod? And they reminded me that when I took them to Rome, we went to mass in a wonderful parish, and all of them, regardless of Catholic, Muslim, whoever, were invited to communion. When I spoke to the Dominican priest afterwards, and I said, in whatever words I can remember, how do you dare do that? And it's the church where St. Catherine of Siena, my patron, is buried. He turned around and looked at St. Catherine and he said, because the women were brave first. And I wonder, perhaps, one thing we talk about in Catholic women's ordination is where we look for the allies in the hierarchy. This priest is a definite ally. He's a brave priest. It's a brave community. And I'm struck by, in so many of our communities, really, maybe with Spirit Unbounded, how do we reach those who really want to speak out? This priest clearly isn't afraid. The Dominicans, I know, have an amazing history, but it's maybe thinking, I would be interested in the panel as to how do we perhaps, I think one of the phrases, find our allies where we don't expect.
Great question. Panelists have thoughts?
Okay, I was wondering, has this event has it been told to Pope Francis himself? Does he know that this is happening? Because, you know, I can really imagine that he would be very, very interested in what we're doing.
Yeah, we'll get to that in one moment, Dennis. We just want to give the panelists time for this current question, but we'll definitely address that.
Okay.
About how it's getting out. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yes, Brian.
There are exceptionally courageous priests and bishops around, and I think it's important for us to understand and appreciate that. But I want to go back to what Margaret Mary said. As a product of the seminary system for 7 years, I would 100% align myself with her comments. Seminaries are dangerous places. And seminaries are the places where priests, young seminarians who want to be priests, first experience what power abuse feels like, either as the victims of power abuse and as they become more senior and more confident throughout the seminary system, the perpetrators of power abuse. So I think there is something very, very important in what Margaret Mary said, and that is the topic of my presentation. I believe that seminaries are the start, not the only issue, but they are a very significant building block in dealing with clericalism. And if I had my word, and Pope Francis could do this tomorrow if he wanted to, he could change the nature of formation of priests and religious throughout the world. That is not all that radical a step. And there are plenty of us here within this Zoom call who could create a better system for formation of priests, religious, male, female, which would definitely combat the ingrained clericalism and hierarchicalism that the seminary and religious formation houses produce.
Talking of Francis, the Pope told Jesuits in Portugal, I don't think it was very long ago, that inclusivity and synodality and importantly and interestingly, doctrinal evolution are crucial to the church. And he used the examples of the changing positions in slavery, nuclear weapons, and the death penalty. And to illustrate his point, he said the church doctrine isn't an unchanging monolith, it holds in effect. And I really hope that spirit, or that, I hope he remembers that as as a synodal process gets underway, inclusivity, synodality, and doctrinal evolution, and isn't sat on. That's what I fear. I think Catherine's point about allies is really interesting. I was involved, as one or two of you know, in a peaceful protest outside the Vatican, St. Peter's Square last summer, and as we were kettled by the Carabinieri, we were women's ordinationists from different campaigns. One cardinal did shake the hand of one of my colleagues and said, "Brava, brava." We've been in touch with him since.
Catherine Peed, I see you've had your hand up for a bit. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. So I'm speaking to you from Canada, and I'm with Concerned Lay Catholics here, and we are companions of Spirit Unbounded. And I just wanted to, I don't know if other people have these kind of thoughts about what we're doing, but I'll just share with you. This morning I had an experience I was talking to a journalist about what we're doing. And as soon as I told him the title of the conference, he said, "Oh, then you're being political, right? Human rights in the church." And he said, the synod is about prayer and about being rooted in prayer. And I had to confess that when Penelope shared with us back in the spring, the title that the team had come up with, I had a reaction too, that human rights in the church takes us into a political conversation and away from a spiritual conversation. And I really had to, kind of play with that. And I'm trusting the Holy Spirit in all of this. But what I want to say is that we aren't the synod. The synod is the thing that's happening. And what I believe and trust, and I may be proved wrong, but what I believe is that Pope Francis and the people who are working with him to give birth to this new vision of church have committed to listening to voices outside of the church. And I think what I think we're saying with this meeting is that across the world, human rights has become a fundamental precept of how we need to treat human beings. And if the church continues to ignore that wisdom from the secular world, from the civil authorities, then it will become increasingly irrelevant and increasingly be dismissed as completely out of touch. So that's the first thing I want to say. I think it's quite legitimate for us to talk about human rights in the church, because it is a stumbling block for the church being relevant in the 20th, never mind the 21st century. But the second thing I want to say is really about this concept of walking together. I walk with a lot of people, have over my life, people in my own family, people in my community, people in my parish. We're not all at the same place at this point. And if you really think about a walking experience, people can't walk in the same place. You bump into each other, you knock each other off the road. Some people are farther behind, some people are farther ahead. Some people trail off and come back. Some people trail off and never come back. The reality is we are of a common mind and we're at a place on the path. And I believe that we have a really important part to play in the conversation, but we're not the whole conversation. And so I go to Rome next week with some of my colleagues, and we're meeting with lots of you who may be there too, and with other groups, Dignity and Catholics for Women's Equality in Canada. So we're all going to be there with an angle. We can see the vision from a perspective. We don't get to see the whole picture. St. Paul says we see through a glass darkly, but in good faith, I'm going there believing that if all of us speak humbly and listen, speak boldly and listen humbly, as we were asked at the beginning of this process, the people inside, I don't trust all of them, but I trust Kathy Clifford from Canada. I mean, we're all in Canada in our kind of group, pretty happy that Kathy's going to be in there. And she's asking us, she's saying, I wear the responsibility of being in this conversation, because she knows that she's representing, or she's there trying to listen and bring the views of, not even the views, but the spirit of what she knows from her own experience. So I just wanted to say those things. I understand the frustration. I want to kick all the bishops out. As I'm meeting last night, and a lot of the lay people who work in our diocese, it's their bread and butter. The church stopped paying my salary 40 years ago. They can't do anything to me. Those young people who are working in our chancery office, this is their bread and butter. And even if they like what we're doing, they can't publicly affiliate with us right now. And that's part of the power that you're talking about. But we have to also we kind of have a patience. Adrian Rich years ago had an anthology of poetry called A Wild Patience Has Taken Me Thus Far. And that's how I feel all the time in the church. A wild patience has taken me thus far. That's all.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Speak boldly and listen humbly. That's well phrased. Mary, did you have a response to that?
Well, I just wanted to take up one of the words that Catherine used, which was humility. And I think that we should, if we're thinking of ourselves as the emerging church, then we shouldn't think that in any way we're immune from problems and difficulties around power, because power is a currency, don't we know it, in all human relationships. So an emerging church could fall into many of the same traps that secular society falls into. And from the very beginning, we would have to form a church where the fundamental value was about everyone's right to be safe and to be protected. But we shouldn't kid ourselves that oppression might not take place in an emerging church, that racism, sexism, oppression of people who are lesbian, bisexual, gay, all of those things we're capable of repeating. So from the start, we have to be very, very clear about what it is that we're doing that's different. And I've personally got a lot of humility about that.
Thank you, Mary. Rian, did you have your?
No, I was just going to say, I really like where you went on the topic of human rights, Catherine. And Francis himself has acknowledged, hasn't he, the kind of the concordance of human rights and concordance of the gospel message and human rights as per the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And he's just to see that through. It's got so many implications.
And to tag back to Francis and to circle back briefly to Dennis's question. Dennis, thank you for raising this. We have confirmation in the chat that two people very close to Pope Francis and involved in the synod know about Spirit Unbounded. So the word is getting out. So I don't know if you have any, but thank you for raising that.
Yeah, that's good. I'm pleased at that, because I'm sure if he could listen to this, he would be very impressed. You know, he's with us. It's it's the other people that are blocking. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Rosa.
Well, this may not make me very popular, and I may end up being uninvited, but that usually doesn't stop me anyway. My community had a workshop with Mark Charles, who is very powerful speaker on the doctrine of discovery. And he pulls no punches. And one of the things he talked to us about was Pope Francis. And he told us that Pope, and it was about, well, the question was brought up, the Vatican, the Pope repudiated the doctrine of discovery. Didn't that do something? And he said, Pope Francis is a good politician. He says what you want to hear. What has he done? What action has happened in the church to change anything? And that really struck home. I think we need to be knowledgeable about that. Mary Hunt also did a retreat for Roman Catholic women priests recently, and she told us to be aware of something called breadcrumbing. And breadcrumbing is in relationships. When people give you just enough hope to think that something good is going to come about, but that's as far as it will get. And I think we need to be aware that looking at what's happening in the earth, that the earth is saying, okay, you all are going to have to vacate because you make me sick. And that everything is falling apart. Looking politically, and yes, we have to look politically. We live in this world. We live with others. About riots and violence, especially violence against women and minorities, that to say wait is a phrase that people with privilege will say to those who are oppressed. Just wait. Wait another year. Wait for another pope. Wait for another 500 years. That is a phrase from the privilege. And I think the time for that is long overdue. And I think we need to go ahead and follow the Holy Spirit and what we're being told to do, not to make a parallel church, but to really listen and to look back at our brothers in who are priests, who are in the hierarchy, and tell our brothers, well, are you coming or aren't you? Because we're not playing that game anymore. We love you to pieces, but you're hurting people. And that will not be allowed to happen anymore. So follow us, the church, or play with your robes.
And maybe that's an entry, Rose, what you're bringing up to the panelists. How maybe is Spirit Unbounding addressing this prophetic edge that Rose is talking about? Are there presentations that you feel maybe speak to this, or this idea of really not waiting, kind of taking things into our own hands? I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that.
Yes, I think not waiting, but also from our rich tapestry of interfaith voices, we're hearing from people in other affiliated to other faith groups and churches who are leading the way, who are modeling the kind of practice that we want to see. So the diversity, the inclusivity, the complete, the equality of the sexes and the genders and so on. They're leading the way and they're telling us that, and it works, and no harm has come to them, and their churches are growing, and it enriches them. So I think one of the strengths of Spirit Unbounded is so much to say, but one of the strengths I think is the inclusion of interfaith voices.
Penelope, I see you may have a thought on this topic, if you'd like to chime in.
Maybe Maggie does too. I was just replying about, do we have any speakers who are going to give a prophetic lead? And yes, I would say that absolutely the majority of them are, really, because what they're telling us is what they're doing in their lives, which is leading. Whether it's ministry, ethics, race, environment. You know, it is the lay person or the nuns who are just leading and just getting on with it. They're doing what the church should be doing, but it always prefers to come at least 100 years behind.
Yeah, I mean, what I
And Rosa, I saw you worried about your ticket. I just want to say all speakers will get this email, but it doesn't go out till something like the 5th of October. And we will make sure you've opened it. And if you haven't, we'll be on to you with another email. So don't worry.
Sorry, I was unable to come earlier, so I've only just got here, but I'm sure you're talking about women priests in the Catholic Church. So I just like to say what we're doing here in Leicester. I've become ordained with a liberal Catholic Church, which quite honestly is absolutely a fantastic church that I should have found out about earlier. I've had a call into ordination since I was 19, which is 1975. So that's 47 years that I've actually had this calling and been through an extremely difficult life because of the challenges of not being able to live in the divine will. You know, when I've been asked to be a priest and I have to be a teacher, teaching RE, which is really not my calling. I mean, I just found it really quite challenging, although I love teaching RE, I love kids, so challenging that I ended up having severe mental health problems for quite a long period of time. And, you know, just really not wanting to live, attempting suicide. And eventually I sort of came to terms with the fact that we all have a calling to priesthood to some extent because of our baptism, because of our promise in the baptism. And when I found the OCAC Church, the Old Catholic Apostolic Church, you know, I became ordained last year. I just felt it was brilliant. It really, really helped. And my priest told me to wear my collar to the Roman Catholic Church, and I did. And I've been going to this church for 12 years. They accepted me, they loved me. The priest said, it's fine. You know, I said, well, can I, you know, before I was ordained, I said, I'm going to get ordained. He said, fine, keep coming. I said, well, when I've got ordained, can I still come? He said, yeah, that's fine. I said, the priest wants me to wear a collar. Wear your collar. And I've been wearing that now for about a year, and it's been fine. And we've been talking about, everyone's very supportive of my ministry and my work in the church. I've been reading quite a few funerals, admittedly not in the Catholic Church, it's in the local crematorium and cemetery. But, you know, I feel that finally I've got a rite of passage under my belt, if you like. I've got some strength and my life has never really been so, I mean, it helps that I'm retired as well. So I've, you know, I have only a small amount of work to do. You know, semi-retired, so I can lead a ministry, and we're helping with the homeless in Leicester, which is really good. We're planting a church there as well. So things are good. And then my priest it's in Knighton in Leicester, you might know it. It's the St. Thomas More Church. Father Michael retired recently. And I thought, oh gosh, well, let's pray about this. And everyone was very supportive and fantastic. I met the new priest last Sunday and I said, I wore my collar, and he said, hi, who are you? He looked really nice. I thought, God, it's great. So I said, well, you know, I'm Reverend Liz. And I thought Michael might tell you something. He said he would, Father Michael. I said, no, Father Michael said nothing, but you can tell me. So I said, well, I got ordained last year in the Liberal Catholic Church. Am I welcome here still? And he said, everybody's welcome. Everybody's welcome. I said, oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
sorry?
We might just have to kind of, we're kind of coming up on time. So I don't know if you had a
But
question.
don't you think this is important that everyone who has an ordination just get ordained, but stay in the Catholic Church? Because most people in the Catholic Church are supportive. I've talked to the bishop in Liverpool. I've talked to the bishop in Nottingham. You know, they're all keen. They're all happy for me to be a priest in the Catholic Church. You know, let's just do it. You might think, oh, I don't know what you think about me, but you know, I've got a postgraduate degree in theology. I was an RE teacher. I've been a Roman Catholic since I was 24, and my heart is with it. You know, we definitely have to do this.
Right. Well, glad you're being able to live out your vocation. Thank you for sharing.
I don't know where the light's gone. It's suddenly gone very dark. Sorry.
No problem. We heard you fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, lots of people here know me. I met Mary, is a good friend of mine. We've worked in Quo together, Catholic women's ordination, for
Great.
quite a long period of time. So people do know me.
I see Maggie had a hand up, and then Marie Therese, and we might be coming up on time after these two. Oh, Maggie, I think you're muted.
Sorry, but that just very quickly, I'm not even sure I should, because I'm part of the home team, but I just really wanted to come back really in support of what Rosa was saying, because I think, you know, there is perhaps sleight of hand going on in some places, because we know early on in this process, sort of in sort of the very early stages of the consultation phase, that when we conducted our content analysis, we could see that the call for reform was huge, and it was right across every area. It was not just the ordination of women priests, but it was about the full welcome of LGBTQI. It was about acknowledging the marginalization of disabled people, of people of color, you name it. It was all mentioned. And there was a huge clamor for this. And this wasn't just in the UK. So we began to see that perhaps there was a bit of a universal playbook being managed, because not all the voices that we were able to prove were there actually filtered through and came out in the final documents. We know that in the state, in North America, in what they called Region 16, for the people that are called from outside the church, sort of supportive church groups and so forth, that they were given their own area in which they could consult on the final part of the working document. And at the end analysis, none of their recommendations actually went forward. And they were told by the bishops of the area it was because they were not appointed by bishops, because they were groups outside of the church. So I think we have to be careful when we say, you know, Pope Francis is really embracing this and he's really very, very different. There are many things that could have changed that have not changed. There are many aspects of canon law that are so questionable and that could change, but don't. The Catholic Church, the Holy See, is the only non-governmental organization that has the right of a vote within the United Nations. It had, in terms of being a signatory of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it signed up to 3. Many significant ones it has not been able to sanction. And significant or conspicuous by its absences, it has not been able to support the eradication of the discrimination against women. These are all things that could be done. So I think we need to, you know, grow up. And why are we having these conversations about asking for permission? It is our church.
Maggie, I really, really agree with you. And those people that say, well, it needs to take time. Things take time. I look back at the missile that was shoved down our throat, how quickly that was done. Books disappeared, new books showed up. We were all trained to recite it like little parrots. And no one questioned, why is there a need to change this? This is silly. It was simply done. And for myself, it's a feeling of, come on, guys, what are we, a cult? We need to really question.
Yes, it's conditioning. They do it with animals. It's conditioning. So I think that the pandemic was a gift because people met in a different way. You know, the sky didn't fall down. The depth of my spiritual experience improved. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to say. We need to walk forward. If we are walking, you know, with the Spirit, that does require a certain bravery and courage. And it is to do that with compassion. But sometimes compassion has to be, we have to follow the Spirit. We need to point out to you what you are doing that is destructive. And that's what Spirit Unbounded is doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. I think that's a very appropriate entrance into next week. I think you've just kind of lifted the curtain a little bit, which was the goal of the evening, was to give a preview, and you've just, I think, summarized just what it's about when we start unfolding these speakers. So we might be kind of coming up to time. I saw there was, I don't know if we lost Marie-Therese, if she maybe had the final question.
I think she stood down, I think.
Okay. So I don't know, I guess I'll just, if there's any final queries, questions, we'll give it a couple minutes, but otherwise we might, I know people, it's getting late in different time zones, so we might want to
I think it's time to wrap up, Michael.
yeah, okay, very good. So I will believe turn it over, Maggie, if you have any closing. That was a beautiful closing thought you just gave, but anything on top of that? Oh,
you're muted again.
Sorry, slow learner. I would just like to say it's been such a rich evening, and it has been a privilege, to be in your company this evening. From Mary Ellen's poem, how beautiful, what a wonderful start. But also, I would just like to just recap, if I could, just some of the points that really struck me from each of our presenters. Victoria started off with saying we need to change the structure. And I think we mustn't lose sight of that. It is about the structure, because there are real people that are hurting and are continuing to be hurt while things are. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on. We have to change the structure. It's simple. Brian, you talked about the isms, and that the church criticizing that the whole destruction and the loss of the faith is because of all of the isms. The only single ism that is responsible for this is clericalism. And that's the one that really needs to be eradicated. It was listening to Rhiannon, I thought it was lovely when Rhiannon was talking about inclusivity. That really is about, that is what enriches us. That is what affirms us. That's what affirms us. And that's what we need to ensure, that we celebrate and aspire and don't settle for anything less. And Mary's work on the shaking of the tree, it has to be shook and consistently shook so that all of this falls out. Impact statements from survivors are never presented. They're silenced, they're marginalized. They're used as tokens sometimes. They're rolled out when it serves the optics of the hierarchy. They are central. It is the survivors that are our prophets. So I would like to just thank all of you. And I would like to thank you, Michael, for drawing the strands and convening everything so well and keeping us to time and keeping everything together. And I would like now to just encourage you to remember that spread the word. This is happening on the 8th of October. We kick off. We want you, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. I don't mean that and we're having a fit. I mean, we're doing that because we're ready to go. So spread the word, tell your friends. There's still time to get some of those online tickets, which you can have forever. And what I would now like to do is to close with a prayer. And I would like to ask for 2 members from our group to say the prayer. It's a prayer that Jacinta, one of our core team, has composed, and it's so beautiful. If we could have 2 people, one person to speak out the prayer and another to respond as the groups would at all. The rest of us will stay muted, but we can obviously respond with the common responses as well. Do we have some brave pair that might like to say this prayer for us?
Someone like to put their hand up?
Pop your hand up.
Peter, you're probably the only person who can see the hands. Raina has raised her hand.
Raina, okay.
Thank you. And Catherine.
Raina and Catherine.
So you decide, perhaps if Catherine call out the prayer, and if Raina maybe do the response that we'll all quietly share with as we're muted. Thank you. We can
We have gathered in community to offer ourselves and our world to you. Blow where you will, in our hearts, in our community, in your church. Open the ears of our hearts,
that we may hear the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, the marginalized, the abused.
Grant us the grace to minister to our sisters and brothers as Jesus taught us,
that we may bless each other with your life-giving love. Grant us the humility,
Grant us the humility to understand your loving authority,
that we may do not our will, but yours.
Open our minds,
that we may respect and celebrate our neighbor.
fill our hearts with strength and courage,
that we may speak out about and support those affected by church-related abuse.
Open the eyes of our hearts,
that we may see the ways in which you are asking us to work for justice, for the gift of creation, for Indigenous people, for the LGBTQ+ people, for the voiceless, for all those in need.
Holy Spirit, be with us as we prepare for our lay-led synodal assembly. Grant perseverance to those creating it. Bless and prosper the work of our speakers. Speak through those who have offered their wisdom. Bring everyone to the table who you desire to be there.
Bring us together in unity. Fill us with your life-giving breath, that we may respond to your call to be the emerging church that you want us to be. Amen.